Welcome to Hannah's Heart.
So Hannah, she's just one of the women who did struggle with infertility in the Bible.
No matter who we are, we can be inspired by the fact that Hannah took her pain to God, and God heard her and was with her.
So when she was praying at the temple, she had been weeping and not eating, and her lips were moving, but her eyes were closed, and the priest was like, "Hey, why are you drunk at the temple?"
It can become an obsession when you want a child so deeply.
And desiring that baby and to be a mama. Every holiday, every Mother's Day.
This is not a show that's going to promise you a certain outcome, but this is a show that says, however God answers your cry, we know that He's enough. Hey, I'm Kendra.
And I'm Ann, and thank you so much for listening to Hannah's Heart on American Family Radio. We are glad to have you back. We're here for a part 2 of a story about infertility and adoption and embryo adoption. And so I'm super excited to continue with, I'll let you introduce the guest.
Jasmine Sorrell. Did I get it right? Okay. And let me just tell you guys, you need to go back and see her part 1. I'll give you the quick update because it's incredible. Let me tell you where we left off last week. The Lord miraculously led your family to embryo adoption.
Yes.
And you had 2 beautiful souls transferred, and we're so hopeful that they would both implant, and they did. And then you went to your ultrasound, and there were 3.
There were 3.
3 babies.
We left y'all on a cliffhanger here. So you'd mentioned that your husband had prayed a unique prayer.
Yeah.
Going into embryo adoption. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit more?
Yeah, he just, I did not know at the time until afterwards that he just was like, Lord, will you just be bold over our family? And
That's pretty bold.
yeah, the Lord was so bold in ways that we couldn't have ever asked or imagined.
Yeah,
And it's so neat how God works. You're like, I was just asking for 1, actually.
Yeah.
And then thank you, God. You gave us 3.
Well, and 3. Statistically, most embryos, there's a 50% chance that they will survive the transfer and attach, in your uterus. And so you had 2 transferring, hoping that you might beat the odds and get both of them.
Right.
And it would be unlikely, but hopeful, to maybe get them both.
Yeah.
And then one of them split apart, which can happen, but is also very rare.
Yes.
Correct? Does that mean that they were identical twins? Is that how that works? Okay.
So we ended up with a set of triplets.
Wow.
But within that triplets, we have a set of identical twins and a fraternal third. So Daniel's our fraternal, and then Elijah and Micah ended up being our identical twins.
Well,
And all boys.
Yes.
And all boys.
And all boys.
But
Beautiful boys. Oh, my goodness.
before we go into your pregnancy, because the story doesn't end with just finding out that they were there.
No.
You didn't have to carry them, have them to, and all.
What
you have
was
to
the
finish
conversation in the car when you left?
So we talk two stories that kind of go with that. So after our ultrasound, they sent us back to the waiting room to wait on the OB.
Oh, wow.
And Matthew and I think we're like staring at our feet going, we want to talk about this, but how do you talk about this? And like, we want to freak out, but you can't freak out. And so like, we were just like sitting in silence, like staring at our feet. And then the second part to that is, you know, our moms, of course, you know, were in on this. And we had to text them both going, hey, the boy, you know, we didn't know the boys.
Okay,
But like,
they
hey, the
were in
babies are
on
good.
you.
They knew that we had told our closest family.
Okay,
before
but
the
they didn't know
transfer.
about the triplets.
No.
Okay.
But we felt the need to text them and say, hey, you know, the babies are there.
Yeah.
You know, we're good. And we were just like, the office is running behind, which wasn't a total lie. They weren't. We'll call when we leave.
Yeah.
And so then when we got in the car, of course, because our moms run pins and needles,
Yes.
like wanting to hear, we FaceTimed them both at the same time. My mom essentially just screamed and then proceeded to not sleep for 3 days.
Oh, my word.
And then my mother-in-law, I think, was just like, "Oh my goodness, like that's so exciting!" That's like, and just like was like just repeating like
She was
how
just
exciting.
having to take it in.
Yeah, and so that has been really fun, especially as I was expecting. Just dropping the bomb that it was 3, watching people's reaction just became almost like this little game of ours, like just because people are amazed.
Hey, how are they going to react?
Yeah, right. And so yeah, it just was a wild time. I remember I had to go back to work and just like sitting at my desk going, nothing else is going to get done the rest of the day. You know, and just like staring at my computer for hours, just trying to take it all in.
But with that, was there some fear too? Because you fall into the category of a high-risk pregnancy just when you have 2,
Right.
let alone 3. How'd you feel?
praise the Lord. I never felt fear. I think everybody around me, that's why my mother will say now she didn't sleep for 3 days.
Okay.
Because all the negative scenarios ran through our head, and everything was looking good. And actually through our pregnancy, like everything went well. But yes, you're exactly right. So I had my typical OB that we saw, but then also an OB that's called in maternal fetal medicine, which is like a high risk OB.
Yeah. Was that in Starkville?
No, so that was in Tupelo.
Okay.
So which is, for those that aren't around here, about an hour from where we lived, and that is also where the closest NICU and
I was wondering
high
about
support-
all of that.
Yeah,
So it was all here.
Yes. So we were driving about an hour for those high risk appointments and prepping the team there as well for 3.
And was that doctor, he was going to be the one to deliver you?
No, so actually he doesn't deliver.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but at that point the hope was that we would have enough time that we could schedule and either my OB come and do it or the OB that was on call, that we could prep the OB on call. Spoiler alert, that did not happen. They had, and the Lord had completely other plans. But everything was going well, that was the goal. So with 3, the goal is to make it to 35 weeks, just because of
Makes
what
sense.
your body can handle, right? And they will let you go longer than 35 weeks gestation, but it just depends on the health of you and the health of the babies. But the whole time, 35 weeks gestation was our goal. And we were cruising.
And everybody told you, like, you're going to make it. That's great, man. You're
Yes.
doing great.
And just how good God had been up until that point, I think we just held on to that. And I think that's maybe why I wasn't scared, because the Lord had already defied the odds over and over and over and over again. And so I just trusted that the Lord would do it again. And then when it didn't happen, that was a whole, I really had to wrestle a lot with the Lord.
And you mean when it didn't happen, you didn't make it to 35 weeks?
No. So the boys came at 29 weeks to the day.
29. Okay, break that
Yes.
day down for us,
Yes.
because I know it will live in your memory forever.
It will. So I actually went to work that day. It was a Friday. And the next day was the baby shower for the boys at my husband's home church in Tennessee. And I remember texting my husband back and forth a lot that day, saying, like, I'm uncomfortable. Something feels off. But, like, people had been like, 3rd trimester with triplets. It's going to be your life.
You're not comfortable.
No, but I just remember praying to the Lord all day, like, God, like, but everybody, because everybody had also said, if you think something's wrong, go check on the boys. And I just remember praying, like, God, I'm going to push through. This is what you called me to do. If you're going to have to really tell me if I need to go check on these boys. So I got home after work. We were heading, like I said, we were going to drive that night to my in-laws' house. And I walk in the house, and I told my husband, hey, we need to talk and see if we need to stop by the Tupelo hospital, because we literally passed it on our way to check on the boys. But in true pregnant lady form, I said, but I need to pee first.
Of course. Every 5 minutes.
That's right. But when I did, it was red. And I remember walking out and I said, nope, there's not a discussion. We are stopping in Tupelo.
Yeah.
Made it clear.
God made it very clear. And so when we got to the hospital, mind you, we left about 3 o'clock. We had both kind of shortened our days that day. It's an hour drive. Let's say they were all here by 5:30.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I know. So
Did you have you had no bags packed? This was not the, like...
no. Well, thankfully we had the bags packed for the weekend for the
Okay.
shower.
Okay,
You know,
okay,
so,
all right,
so we had
something.
the basics that we needed. But yeah, so we got there, and the nursing staff was trying to find all 3 heartbeats, and and we're like, one of them was like, let's just like see where you are, let's check. And the next thing I know, the OB comes in, and she looks at me, she's like, you're fully dilated, and I'm holding a bag of water in your hand. So y'all, I had been in labor all day and had zero clue.
Oh, my God.
Girl, you tough.
And-
You tough stuff.
Tough as nails.
And so from the moment that she said that to the moment she made her decision, it had happened so quickly. I did end up having to go under general anesthesia. Was 7 minutes.
Wow.
And so that's literally why it moved so quickly.
They can deliver babies in like 45 seconds.
And they did.
Wow.
They did. But they talked. So Daniel was our firstborn. The entire pregnancy, he was really he was head down the entire pregnancy. He was the one that we joke caused the problems, and we're like, you just wanted to see us early. He actually had to be pulled out feet first because he was so deep down the birth canal.
Wow. Okay.
And the OB later was like, I don't love to do that, but I didn't have a choice. So they were born at 29 weeks, 0 days.
So you said Daniel. What were the other two
Yes.
names?
Elijah is our middle and Micah is our oldest. And there's about a minute in between each of the 3 boys.
Wow.
So what are the health complications at 29 weeks, you said?
Yes. A lot.
Especially
can go
for
wrong.
triplets.
Especially for triplets. Thank goodness they were all sitting right at about the 50th percentile. So weight-wise, even for a singleton.
Is that 50 percentile for triplets?
No, for singletons.
Wow.
Are you serious?
So the Lord was so gracious.
So what did they weigh?
They were all between 2.5 and 3.5 pounds. So they were still small.
Still teeny
Right.
tiny.
Wow.
Still teeny tiny, but for 29 weekers, really great.
Wow.
And but at that age, you're concerned about their breathing, you're concerned and their lung development, especially because, nowadays you can do medicine beforehand that helps develop their lungs, of which the week prior, the maternal fetal medicine doctor and I had decided, no, we're good. You're doing so well. You don't need it. We're like, okay. So that goes through my head of
Sure.
so we didn't give the boys the best shot that we could have. But then also brain bleeds are significant. And so the number one cause of cerebral palsy is actually brain bleeds in preemies.
Oh, wow.
Or one of the number one causes. And so that's something you're looking at, but you're also concerned about they're eating literally anything and everything can go wrong at 29 weeks.
What was it like waking up? Because you went under general anesthesia, so you wake up and you're a mama to 3.
Yeah. So that was a wild story. We had, being quote unquote prepared, had called our moms on the way when we left Starkville and said, hey, we just want you to know we're going to go check on the boys. Not a big deal. And so nobody was there when the boys came. And it was funny. On the car ride there, I had looked at Matthew and I had said, I don't think we're going to need this, but you know where they are in my womb, because they had been, and we had named them. We had been praying for them specifically where they were in my womb.
Aww.
And I said, so you know how to name them. And I said, and then 2, I said, you know your job. I said, I'm an adult. You know your job is to follow the boys.
Good.
If something happens, and we had a plan, but I was like, you remember your job's to follow the boys and to advocate for the boys. That is your job.
Yeah.
And so when I woke up in recovery, he wasn't there.
Oh, that's scary.
So
He's doing the right thing.
Yes,
It's still scary.
So my assumption was that he was with the boys. Yeah. In hindsight, in the chaos of it all, they had sent him to my recovery room, and he was sitting in the recovery room by himself.
No.
Oh my goodness.
For an hour. Freaking out, apparently calling both of our moms, going where are y'all? What's going on?
Oh my goodness.
And so I had told the recovery staff, my husband and I made this decision. He's with the boys. We all assumed that. So about 5 or 10 minutes after I woke up, my mom came in, and security had her name and brought her right back. So I had my mom pretty quickly.
Oh, wow.
And then when we rolled in, of course, he was sitting there. He's like, where have you been? And I was like, I thought you were with the boys. But that absolutely wasn't the case.
Wow.
So what did happen with the boys? What as they were born, were there any major concerns? I know that you ended up a NICU stay, but
yes. So your typical preemie stuff. Okay. I will say a side note. Just once again, the Lord takes care of the small details. Is one of the things that we had prayed for and really concerned about was how we're going to tell the identical twins apart. Right? They're identical, and that's the 3. And Elijah was actually born with an extra toe that we had not seen. Yeah, and which also is they're identical. Think about it.
How could that happen?
They should have both had an extra toe.
Sure.
But he was
interesting.
But just Elijah.
That's so funny.
Oh my
I was like, I got you.
Yeah,
I'm so tired. I'm gonna make this
like,
obvious for you.
Literally, the Lord just showed up time and time again, in all the cool ways. But yeah, that kind of started our NICU journey. And I remember really quickly, even after waking up, once things settled. So because I went under general anesthesia, I was the last one to see the boys. So Matthew had seen them, my parents had seen them, his parents had seen them.
My goodness.
And so then when I finally got to see them, so that kind of, I think, started, and I was telling Kendra a little bit before this, I found myself really angry at the Lord because things had gone so well. The Lord had shown up time and time again, and we had just trusted that we were going to make it to 35 weeks. And then all of a sudden, here we are at 29 weeks, and I've got 3 preemies on my hand. And just how the Lord showed up and worked. And y'all, I have miracle babies. We learned that last episode, right? But just truly, kind of a spoiler alert, they're almost 9 months. We're maybe sitting a couple weeks delayed, but no significant health problems have been cleared by everybody. They are walking and babbling, or not walking, almost crawling, I guess I can say, and babbling miracles. But
One of the time you don't know this, and you're like, how long am I here? And I don't get to hold them. I don't get to be the first one to see it.
Yes.
Were you able to even touch them that first day?
So because they were so preemies, they were put on a 72-hour like hold of sorts where it was like limited touch. So I think I might have like gotten to put a finger in or something the first 72 hours, but essentially like it was, I got to hold Daniel first, and it was a little after that 72-hour mark. So it was several days.
Wow.
So you have all these expectations of that moment that you're having to now release because it didn't happen.
It didn't happen, right.
Okay.
And
everybody talks about their birth plan. This was probably not on it, I'm guessing.
No, nowhere near on our birth plan. And I think that's too where some of the anger came from. Is like things had gone so well, and it was like, Lord, what are you doing? This was not in the plan. But I will say, like, the Lord always meets us where we're at, and meets our needs where we're at. And one of that is, one of that is, he met me really tangibly. Like it was the first time in my life I couldn't even open scripture, just out of anger, and I was having a hard time praying. But he constantly showed up. Like the women of our church kept us fed. So yeah, yes. And the men of our church did a lot of the physical things around the house, kept the yard mowed for Matthew, and like would just show up and handle that kind of stuff. My work paid to have our house cleaned,
because your babies are an hour away.
Yes.
And what's that looking like on a day-to-day?
So thank goodness. So Matthew works full-time from home, but he's expected to work like quote-unquote typical work hours. But he was able to shift where he worked 6 to 3. Wow. I wanted to save my maternity leave for when the boys came home. Yeah. So I was grateful that I had a really flexible job. So I took a week off of just like regular PTO, like sick leave. So they were born on a Friday, took that next week off, and then I went back to work that Monday, but just remotely.
So hard.
Yeah.
After a C-section.
Yes. And that's why I was remote. And so a lot of our, my colleagues picked up a lot of the client work, and then I was picking up a lot of the paperwork on the back end, and like a lot of the report writing and documentation and things like that. So I could do it remotely. So we would literally get up, him and I would work 6 to 3. We would quote unquote eat dinner, which was usually something frozen or that the women of the church had provided. Wow. Leave our house by 3:30. Make the hour drive, and then every 3 hours is a care time for a NICU baby. And so we held an entire room and an entire nurse because there was 3 of us. And so, for example, like the care times, we would get there and do 5, 5:30, and 6. So we would start with one baby at 5, move to the second baby at 5:30, and then 6. And then we would stay and then do it again at 8, 8:30, and 9.
Wow.
And then drive back home and then get up the next morning and do it again.
Do it all again.
What is that like to leave the hospital and not take your baby with you?
It's so hard. It's so hard. And that's where the strength of others, we were so prayed for. And I fully believe that our church family, our family's church families, and like, that's the only thing that sustained us. Like, I can't explain it because it's not easy. It's not easy. And just like I said, just like the Lord showing up and like constantly reminding him, like me, that they were his. So we knew when we named them, we wanted biblical names. And it was so interesting that everybody that we met would be like, I love your biblical names. And so it was like the Lord, like constantly reminding like us of like, I've got them. They are mine. Yeah. But then also too, like him reminding me of his goodness, because then everybody would, then the second thing that they would say is, you don't have wimpy white boys. And
what does that mean? Break that down for us.
If you don't know that, statistically, white males have the least developed lungs at birth when compared to all other races and genders, or females. And so because they didn't need the lung support, like they were on what they consider like high flow oxygen. So like you think like the nasal cannula that you think about oxygen by like day 2 or 3.
That's crazy.
And like didn't need a ventilator, didn't need a CPAP. They needed a CPAP like the first couple of days, but like really quickly we're progressing. And they even told us at the beginning to expect to be there to my due date. So essentially 11 weeks.
Wow.
And the earliest they will let a baby walk out of the NICU is at 35 weeks gestation. Daniel walked out at 45 days, which was about 35 weeks and 2 days.
Wow.
So like literally as early as he could have, which was a walking miracle.
That's crazy.
And then the twins came home at 60 and 61 days. And so they were right
now
at...
you have a baby at home.
Oh, yeah.
And 2 in the hospital.
That was a whole nother world. And so praise goodness for our families, because they also carried us, and like they were they have limited people that can be with you in the NICU. Like it's not like a typical hospital, just because they want to keep germs away from the babies. And so we were really limited to our families that could be there with us. And but they were right there along with us. And there were even a couple of days that Matthew and I did not have the energy to go, but we were dead set that somebody, not that the nursing and the staff didn't love them, but somebody that loved them was going to be there to hold them and to remind them that. And so on the days that Matthew and I couldn't, either my mom and dad would go, his mom and dad would go.
Wow.
And like remind you, like that's a huge sacrifice for them too. Like Matthew's family is still like 2 hours away from Tupelo. Wow. Like my family's like over an hour away from, like closer probably to an hour and a half. And so they were making huge sacrifices right alongside.
Yeah, but what an honor. Like, that's an honor for them to be asked to take mama and daddy's place,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and so that's what essentially my mom and Matthew's mom, that about 2 weeks that Daniel was home and the other two weren't, moved in with us. And like they traded off days.
So and not only are those names biblical, they're also strong biblical characters. You found out later something about all those names, right?
Yeah. We did not put two and together. We just felt close called to those names until we told my father-in-law is a pastor. He was like, "Oh, those are all prophets." And we were like, "Oh, yeah, they are."
That's why they're not wimpy white boys.
That's why they're not. Exactly. And they have truly held to those names.
I have a theory that the babies that, like the women who struggle with infertility and have just wanted children, or maybe have gone through adoption and like have been so prayed over, that there's a special plan for every child. I don't want to discount that, but that there's something unique when there's extra prayer that goes into how you came to this family, that there's a unique calling and purpose on those children's lives. And like, I mean, maybe God's going to call them to be prophets in our world and go speak the truth.
And I hope that is the case, and that is mine and Matthew's prayer every single day, that they will go out and declare the gospel, because their story does that already. Yeah. And that was something that it's been interesting when we started this. Like, we were really reserved at telling our story, especially of embryo adoption, just because of the unknowns. And the longer we've gone, Matthew and I are like, no, this is, the Lord walked us through this. Even the NICU journey, not a journey I would wish on upon anybody, but like, what a special ministry now we have, because we know how to love and serve those families that are walking it, because we walked it, and navigating it. And this is not what I had planned, but I don't think anybody plans for infertility and adoption and all of these things. And yet the Lord's plan is always better than ours.
Bold. His plan is bold.
It's bold. It is. It absolutely is.
We're almost out of time, but two questions that I think our listeners might want to know. One, doing embryo adoption, when you brought them home, did you feel instant love and connection? Did they feel like yours?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They are. You brought them home.
Yes. And because, like you said, like, they were in my womb.
You get those extra moments and connection.
Yes. Like, I felt them kicking. I felt them flipping. Like, I learned their personalities in the womb, and they're still the same. Like, we laugh. And because they were named in the womb. So absolutely, they feel 100% like ours. And it's funny, we laugh because everybody looks at us and is like, Daniel looks like you. The twins look like Matthew, and we're like,
God does that sometimes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when I saw their picture, I didn't think like, oh, they don't look like her. You don't think that at all.
So they do have some characteristics of us, and I think that's just part of the Lord's good.
We call them little God winks.
Absolutely.
I love that. Okay, so my second question is, now that you've brought them home and you're thinking about raising them, telling them their story and explaining it. What does that look like? When do you do that?
So my PhD is in psychology, so we did a lot of research about like what that looks like, and the research now is really leaning towards like, don't do a quote unquote, this is the day.
Okay.
Don't have like the talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
Too
wait
much
till
emphasis.
Right, but or like day 10, or like when they turn 10, say, oh yeah, by the way, you're adopted. And they have no clue.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
And so it really looks like starting their story now and just dedevelopmentally like changing
a little bit as they grow.
It is. And there's so many like even like children's books. There's like resources. Like one of my favorite has the analogy of like peas in a pea pod. And so and it talks about how your mom gave up you like you were a pea and then implanted to me like the pea pod, and that's how you came out. So there are a lot of really great resources to now that exist that help you start to share that story.
That's
and
cool.
so,
And
and
it's just like part of everyday life.
Exactly.
Like, it's not a secret for so long.
right. And Matthew and I too have really felt the call that, like, we are adopted as sons and daughters, that the Lord tells us that. And how then can we be ashamed to share that their story, and that I hope and pray that they boldly share that they're adopted by us, just as we are adopted as sons and daughters into the Lord's family.
So good. So good. So you would do it all over again.
Absolutely. I sure would.
Well, that is the music. Again, we are out of time, but what an incredible story of God's faithfulness and blessing and boldness.
Yes.
Bold blessing poured out on your family. Thank you so much for coming and for sharing this story.
Thank y'all.
Oh, yeah. I could listen to it again.
Right?
I think you did good. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for listening to Hannah's Heart on American Family Radio.